When you think of South Korea today, what pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably cutting-edge Samsung phones, maybe huge K-pop bands, or even Oscar-winning movies like Parasite. It's become this global powerhouse of culture and technology. But behind that incredible success story, there's a paradox, a darker side, that honestly, we need to understand to get the full picture. So let's pull back the curtain and really look at the true cost of this modern miracle.
Okay, first, you have to appreciate just how massive this miracle really was. I mean, look at these numbers from the World Bank. Back in 1960, South Korea was one of the poorest countries on the planet. GDP per capita, about $100. Now, fast forward to today, and it's over $33,000. That isn't just growth, folks. That is one of the most explosive, rapid economic transformations in all of human history. They call it the Miracle on the Han River for a reason.
But here's the other side of that same coin. For years now, South Korea has held this really grim distinction. It has the highest suicide rate among all the developed, wealthy nations in the OECD. And, that single devastating statistic, it just forces you to look past the shiny skyscrapers and ask a really difficult question.
And that is the absolute core question we're trying to figure out in this explainer, right? How can a nation achieve so much, so incredibly fast, but at the same time create an environment with this level of intense, crushing pressure? To get to the bottom of it, we really have to go back to the very beginning.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to start from the ashes of war, then see how they built these global corporate giants. After that, we'll look at the immense price paid by the people, the cracks that are now starting to show, and finally, what could possibly come next for Korea.
All right, so let's set the scene. It's 1953. The Korean War has just ended, and the peninsula is just devastated. I mean, the country has almost no natural resources to speak of, very little industry. The future looked incredibly bleak.
The whole transformation really kicks off in the 1960s under President Park Chung-hee. He started these super aggressive 5-year economic plans. And the government didn't just, hope for growth, it actively engineered it. Then, in the 70s, the focus shifted to heavy industries, stuff like steel and shipbuilding. By the 1980s, South Korea was a powerhouse, earning its title as one of the 4 Asian tiger economies.
So here's the strategy, and this is the crucial part. This was not a free market for all situation, not at all. It was a top-down, state-controlled model. The government basically acted like the CEO of Korea Inc. It would pick what it thought would be winning industries, shower them with cheap loans and support, and then demand just one thing in return: go conquer the global market. The mantra was essentially, export or die. Now, a strategy that aggressive needs some corporate soldiers on the front lines to make it happen, right? The government needed heroes for its economic story, so it basically decided to create them. And that brings us to maybe the single most important concept for understanding the South Korean economy: the rise of the chaebol. So what in the world is a chaebol? Well, put simply, it's a gigantic, family-owned business group. I mean, think of a single company that makes your smartphone, your TV, the giant ship that carried them across the ocean, and even the apartment building you might live in. You definitely know their names: Samsung, Hyundai, LG. These companies were handpicked to be the champions of Korea's economic war.
And the scale here is just staggering. The revenue of just a handful of these top chaebols makes up this enormous chunk of South Korea's entire GDP. It just does to show you how deeply intertwined these companies are with the nation's health. They aren't just part of the economy. In a lot of ways, they are the economy.
And all of this led to this powerful shared belief, almost a national motto: what's good for Samsung is good for South Korea. This tight-knit partnership between the government and the corporations was the absolute engine of the miracle. It created unbelievable growth. But, as we're about to see, it also concentrated immense power and wealth into the hands of just a few families, planting the seeds for some serious problems down the road. Okay, so we've seen the miracle and we've seen the corporate engine that powered it. But, every engine needs fuel. So now let's talk about the human fuel that made this whole thing run, and the incredible culture of pressure that it created. For many in Korea, the path to a successful life feels like this predetermined, grueling track. It starts super young with intense schooling and private cram schools called hagwons. It all builds up to the Suning, a legendary 8-hour, single-day exam that can basically define your entire future. If you make it, you get into a top university, then land a job at a top company where you're hit with the famous Bali Pali or hurry hurry work culture, all while dealing with immense social pressure to succeed. And here's the key connection you have to make.
This culture of insane competition and relentless work wasn't some accidental side effect of success. No, it was a core feature of the development model itself. The country needed a highly educated, disciplined, and ridiculously hardworking population to compete globally, and the entire social structure basically evolved to produce exactly that. It's a pretty powerful example of how big economic policies shape our actual everyday lives. And if you're finding these kinds of connections interesting, a quick subscribe or like really does help us make more explainers just like this one. Okay, so now let's look at what happens when this human engine starts showing some serious signs of strain.
For decades, the social contract was pretty simple. Work incredibly hard now, sacrifice for the group, and you'll get a better future. But what happens when that future finally arrives and it's not quite what was promised? The very model that built the miracle is now creating some pretty profound challenges for modern South Korea.
This right here really lays out the whole paradox. On the left, you've got the incredible legacy of the miracle, but on the right, you see the dark reality that comes with it. So yeah, South Korea is a global tech leader, but its young people face this crushing competition. It has a high life expectancy, but also the highest rate of elderly poverty in the OECD, because the mad dash to industrialize kind of shredded the traditional family safety nets. It's an economic powerhouse, but its people are drowning in record-high household debt just trying to keep up.
Let's just zoom in on that debt for a second. As you can see from IMF and OECD data, household debt in South Korea as a percentage of GDP is one of the highest in the entire world. People have borrowed massive amounts for things like housing and education, all chasing this dream of success that feels like it's getting further and further away. And that puts a huge strain not just on families, but on the whole economy.
And that really brings us to the pivotal question for the country right now. That old formula, the top-down, high-pressure, chaebol-led model, it worked wonders for catching up. But is it the right formula for building a stable, happy, and sustainable society for the long haul?
So, South Korea really is at a crossroads. The strategies that brought it so much wealth have also sown the seeds of these major future challenges. And now, they have to be dealt with.
And here are the big ones. First, a demographic time bomb. South Korea has the world's lowest birth rate, a direct consequence of how expensive and stressful it is to raise a kid in this system. There's also a huge debate about reforming the chaebol and their massive influence. And critically, the nation has to figure out how to build a much stronger social safety net to take care of the people who are left behind by the miracle's frantic pace.
So if there is one central lesson to pull from South Korea's incredible story, I think it's this. The single-minded pursuit of economic growth, without paying equal attention to things like social well-being and equality, can leave behind some really deep wounds. The pressure, the inequality, these aren't just numbers. They are the lived realities created by the very same engine that built the miracle in the first place.
And that really leaves us with a final, crucial question that goes way beyond just South Korea. What is the actual goal of a national economy? Is it just to make a number on a chart go up? Or is it about the health, the happiness, and the well-being of its people? How South Korea chooses to answer that is going to define its next chapter. And really, it's a question every country has to face. If this explainer helped you think a little differently about how economic decisions shape our lives, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe, or maybe share your own thoughts down in the comments below.